Cloud. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Arts Workshop. My name is Ramon Gill. I'm the organizer. We've been doing this since 2017. We have had some amazing guests, and tonight is not an exception. I'm sorry if you guys are missing the DNC. I'm sure there'll be reruns. So, but it's only for like an hour, so I'm sure it'll still be going by the time we get out. So tonight we have with us a very special guest, a writer. And I met David at the Long Beach Comic Expo a couple of years ago. He was right next to me, and I finally got him on the show. I just saw him at the American Library Association conference, and
That's right.
that's at the fan base press table. So Barbara's
I
very
think it was more, Ramon. I think it was more than a couple of years ago. Time has no meaning anymore, right? So
well. I
I
was at
think
the
we
Long
go
Beach
way
Comic
back.
Expo. I can look it up because I know it was the Long Beach Comic Expo, and I have a record of where all the cons I've been to. Let me just see.
Sure.
Really quickly. It would have been, gosh, 20
I know. Taking opposites.
February. It's a
True.
February, right? It doesn't even
It's good.
go
It's
back
good.
that far.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, we go back at least a couple of years.
Couple of years, yes.
Yeah.
And since then, you really made some tremendous strides in your work. I think back then you were with Vault.
Yeah, so I published my first ever comic book with Vault right when
Yes.
they first started as a comic book publisher.
So we will cover that in our actual interview. So let's get started. Everybody, please give a nice round of applause to David Booher.
Booher, yeah.
Booher. Okay, Booher. Coming to us today all the way from Los Angeles. Yes. All right.
That's
So
right. West Coast.
West Coast. There you go. So, anyways, let me pull up my questions. So as we just mentioned, I met David at the Long Beach Comic Expo years ago. He was a writer, and he's done a lot of work since then. So, David, can you tell us a little bit about your career path and training and previous experience?
Well, it's kind of a unusual and usual career path, I think, for a lot of folks. So I actually grew up in the Midwest, in Ohio, and I went to college in Miami, Florida. And I originally started as a music major. I studied music in
Oh,
college.
really?
Yeah, and I quickly transitioned out of that. That wasn't a great fit for me, so I went to the business school. And then after I graduated undergrad, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And it certainly comics were not on the radar. Writing was not on the radar. So as a 22-year-old kid, I decided that I wanted to go to law school. So I ended up going to law school at USC, Southern California, moving out to LA, never having been west of the Mississippi before I moved to start law school. So that was pretty wild. Um, yeah, I went to USC for law school. I graduated in 2004 and became a lawyer. And I was a lawyer for 17 years before I left. And in those 17 years, I started developing this love of writing. So I started writing fiction and then some screenplays and some TV. And then
Sorry, go ahead.
that's okay. So I started writing, TV, film, that sort of thing. And eventually I started going to San Diego Comic-Con. And that is really where I wasn't, I used to say that I didn't read comics as a kid, but that's not true. It's that my sort of idea of comics has evolved over time. So I never read like DC, Marvel, like the big two, the books that you pull off the rack, right? Single issues. Never read those. But I read Mad Magazine, I read Far Side, Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, the Sunday funnies in the newspaper. That's all comics. It's so wonderful to think that like Watchmen and Calvin and Hobbes, they have the same comic DNA, just different branches of the same tree. So I started going to San Diego Comic-Con about 18 years ago, and I started picking up comics. What are these comics you speak of? I started reading them, and I decided I would like to try my hand at it.
That is a
So
very, very unique career path to comics. I mean,
yeah, and
music and then law.
yeah, business and then law, and then I felt that creative urge to write, and so um, and it was about 2015 when I approached Vault, or the company that would evolve into Vault Comics, with an idea that I had, and they liked it, and so they decided to publish my first work, and that was 2017, and I was nowhere close to leaving my day job as an attorney. Because you start out these things. I didn't know what I was doing, and you publish something and you hope for the best, and sometimes it doesn't work. You know, become the success that you dream of, but you got to keep at it. So I did my first two series at Vault. Then I moved over to IDW, and that's when I did Canto, and that seemed to have opened a lot more doors for me to start working more steadily in the industry. And then from there, I just continued to sort of pitch ideas and publish work.
How
Piece of
did you go
cake, right?
from Vault to IDW?
So it was Canto. It was uh, the Drew Zucker is the artist on Canto, and he's I have some visual aids. So this is Canto.
Right,
He's a
but I
little
guess my question is more, I mean, well, what was your into IDW? Was it people working, was it purely from what they saw your work over at Vault, or did you know somebody at IDW? What happened there?
So I made it a point over the years to meet editors, even when I had nothing to pitch to them, or I wasn't pitching, I wasn't interested in, I wasn't at the point of working with these editors. So by the time I did have something like Canto, I had specific editors at different publishers that I knew that knew me, and I could reach out to them. And so to get into IDW, we got a referral from a good friend of ours, um, who we knew, and he was working at IDW on some different things. And so he referred us to his editor. His editor referred us to the selection committee. And at that point, it's out of your hands. Then the committee looks at it and decides whether or not your project is something they want to publish. So it was meeting specific editors to get in the door. But beyond that, it's like it's all about the quality of the work.
Right, right. That makes sense. Um, Let me ask you, I know that I asked you was how did you break into comics, but that's already covered here. So let me ask you another question then. You've been nominated for the Eisners and for GLAAD, right? So
Yeah,
did those nominations move the needle in terms of your career?
that's a tough question. It's sort of hard to quantify at times. I think for me, it wasn't so much about using it as a tool to further my career. Of course, you put it in your biography, um, but it was I don't know. I don't know. It's a hard question because I don't know if it did move the needle in the sense that my door wasn't being pounded down because I got nominated for an Eisner Award or a GLAAD Award. But I mean, I felt so good that the teams got together and they did work that rose to the level that somebody outside of that sort of recognized the quality of what the whole team was doing. So I'm always going to have that in my bio forever until my last day, and after that, the Eisner nominee, GLAAD Award nominee, and I think that to me is probably even more important than any doors that it might open. Just having that moment, um, to recognize the whole team, honestly, and not it's not me. I mean, the visuals are really stunning on everything. So, really, kudos to the teams who are on these things for getting to that point. And I hope that it helps all of them. I hope it helps all of us down the road.
This was for Canto, right?
No, so this was for I got the Eisner nomination was for Rain, and that was a short story that was written by Joe Hill that we adapted to a comic book with Chris Riles, Syzygy Publishing and Image. And then I also was nominated for Killer Queens, which was a book that we published through Dark Horse. And then the GLAAD Award was Killer Queens. Actually, both volumes of Killer Queens got nominated for GLAAD Award. So that was fantastic. Two different art teams, still just doing what we do, right?
Well, congratulations. That is quite an honor. Let me ask you. So you've worked on your own creator-owned work, and you've also done licensed work. Can you tell us a little bit about, how do they compare?
I think about this a lot. I think about it a lot because there's lots of things that go into licensed work versus creator-owned work. And I started in creator-owned, so there's like the creative aspect of it is you're not confined by anything but your own imagination. You could do whatever you want. These are your characters. This is your story. You have freedom, complete freedom to do whatever you want. And you get to keep the IP, which is really
All the
important.
rights. Yeah.
All the media rights, because I work in film, I work in TV. So to have a project that I create in comics that I also own for adaptation purposes is really important. But with that said, you are starting from scratch from every single story that you create. You start from scratch. You bring your own popularity as a person, as a writer, but you're starting from the very step one as you're trying to get people to learn about this story, learn about these characters. That's creator-owned bucket. The license bucket, you get to step into a world that's already existing. So I wrote Ghostbusters, I wrote Dungeons and Dragons. Those are huge IPs, huge. So I get to step in, I get to do a story where the audience is already familiar with the characters, they're already familiar with the world. So I get to play in that. And that's a lot of fun. It relieves some of the pressure of having to create everything from scratch. That said, you have to play within the four corners of the IP. You've got other people you got to answer to, and they may be doing something in the movie space that you have no clue. And they come back to like, you can't use that character because we're going to use it down the road. Lucasfilm, Star Wars is a great example. You got to be very careful about what you use because they've got so many plans for everything. So there's that, but you don't have to build up the worlds from scratch. You don't have to build the characters from scratch. You don't own the IP. So, but you get the credit. I get the credit that I wrote Ghostbusters, which is great, which is fantastic. So it really is 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think the best, most successful folks in comics right now are mixing IP with creator-owned books. And they sort of do both of those things, and everything sort of rises together.
Got it. Let me ask you something. Now for the IP work, do they approach you or do you pitch to them?
Usually it can be sort of either. Once you have a pre-existing relationship with an editor, and say you hear the editor has picked up Magic the Gathering or something like that, just as an example, and you're really interested in Magic, you can always reach out to the editor and say, hey, I've got an idea for a story, what's going on with it? And I do that a lot. And then sometimes the editors will get the projects in across their desk and they'll think, hey, he expressed interest in doing some license work. I think he'd be a good fit for it. So let's reach out to him for that. So it's a little bit of both, which is why it's so important to sort of network and meet editors, because you have to be on the radar for them to even think of you when something comes across their desk. So you got to pursue it and you got to hope that they think of you, and it's kind of all those things together.
Now, especially when it comes to the licensed work, or even any aspect of the business, actually, has your law degree helped?
You mean for contracts?
Yeah, for contracts.
It's actually helped me in two ways. So I'm inactive, so I don't practice anymore. I don't have clients. I get contracts and I can certainly read contracts. I've seen enough deals to know this is what should be in them. That said, I definitely have people who I have my own, I hire legal counsel because
Oh,
that's their
really?
bread and butter. Oh yeah, I have folks who will read over these contracts. but I then I get back notes and on the contracts and I understand. I get it. And I know an attorney is doing a really good job too, because I'll go through the contract and I'll make all my notes on it. And then I'll wait before I say anything. And the attorney comes back with their notes and I'm like, these are mesh so perfectly. They're doing a good job. So I do that. But also one of the things that I learned as an attorney is how to write, because I spent 14 of my 17 years in practicing law writing legal opinions for judges, research and writing. And you have to be concise. You
Yeah.
got to be accurate. You got to get to the point. You have to be structured. Creatively, you can sort of do a lot more, but I rarely have typos in the scripts. Things are concise and direct,
Are you
and it's
heavy
just
into
not
research?
when I need to. Like if it's a world I don't know, I will definitely research it. But I'm definitely like, okay, I read the Wikipedia page. I feel confident. I feel good about it. Let me just go with it.
Do you ever get a contract and you send it back? And can we change this?
Yeah, all the time, all the
Okay.
time.
Now
Don't you know
forgive
who I am? No, I'm just kidding.
now forgive me, I didn't know this about you, but so you work on film and TV too, huh? How does that
Yeah.
compare? And why not just do film and TV and if you can get film and TV?
Well, it's tough out there for everybody from start to finish. Um, and I think again, it's about a mix. It's creating your own work. Hollywood really wants underlying projects, underlying properties. So whether it's a short story or a comic or a novel, or a podcast, anything like that, the development executives are much more inclined to take on projects that have something pre-existing. So that anytime that you can put pictures in front of studio executives, you're better off. So comics are a perfect medium. I can take my work and I can show them, this is the page, this is what it looks like as a book, here's how I envision it as a movie. Um, and doing that is kind of like that's the that's the sweet spot. And I think they're more inclined to be interested in talking to you if they know that you're into comics. They're like
Interesting.
they
Okay.
kind of think we're cool. I think.
Do you know Adam Beechan? Oh.
I, the name sounds familiar.
He was sitting next to a table away or two away from you back at Long Beach Comic Expo, but he does comics and TV. He does mostly TV and film. So we had
Sure,
him on the show also, but he said the same exact thing, the mix. And
you got to have the mix.
speaking of other people, Barbara Dillon went to law school.
Oh, I did not know that about Barbara.
Yeah, we had her here last month, and same thing. She went to law school and ended up in comics. So
Oh,
but
that's
she never
amazing.
practiced though.
There's quite a few folks who are in comics right now who are recovering reformed attorneys. We'll always be attorneys. I tell everybody, I will always be an attorney. It's just whether or not I'm practicing officially.
Right. Yeah, there's another guy I know, John Crowther down in Florida, and he's a practicing attorney, and he does creator-owned wrestling biographies.
Oh,
So,
that's fun.
so anyways, let me ask you another question. Can you tell us a bit about how your LGBTQ work has played a role in your career?
Sure. So I'm part of the community and it seeps into every single thing I do. Whether, whether or not I want it to, it just it just gets in there. It just gets in there. So I think we all bring our own life experiences to our work, whether specifically, like if it's an autobiographical story, I just published one of those in this anthology called When I Was Young. It was about me growing up and as a queer kid in a smallish town in Ohio. But then it's like, if there's parents, I do this a lot. If there's parents in a story with a kid, it's two dads or two moms, and it's just like I can I can speak. I'm not a parent, but I can speak to the experience of having that, this couple of two men who are a couple. That's my life experience. So being able to bring that authentically to the page is just something that I do. I made I wrote a series called Killer Queens, and I pitched it as Guardians of the Galaxy. All L It's an all LGBTQ plus creative team, and just creating a big fun sci-fi romp like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers with two queer leads. And I would not have been comfortable making that necessarily if I wasn't part of the community and we had a whole team that could speak to it from their experience. And that's what got nominated for a couple of GLAAD awards and an Eisner award. So it's that authenticity that I just bring, whether I intentionally do it or just do it by putting my own experience on the page. That's sort of always informing everything that I do.
I can relate. Almost all my stories will feature, if not as the lead or as prominent supporting characters, Asian Americans.
Yeah.
And it's the story's not necessarily, and it has nothing to do with being an Asian American. It just so happens that the characters are Asian American.
I mean, that's the beauty of creator-owned comics, that you can create characters and you can make choices about them that are personal to you, and nobody can come say that's wrong. That character isn't Asian, shouldn't be Asian American, or isn't something like that. It's your work. You get to do what you want to do with it.
Okay. What are some qualities you think somebody needs to make it in comics?
Oh boy. There's a lot. There's a lot, but I think the key for you have to obviously be talented. You got to be able to write or be able to draw at a level where you're not like I can't I draw a little, but definitely not to the level where I'm not going to hire an expert to do that or partner with an expert artist who knows how to do this stuff. But for me, I think the key to being successful when you do feel like you are technically ready to step out into the industry. I spent 10 years going to Comic Cons, meeting editors, going up to publishers' booth, being fans of their work for a full decade before I even started pitching anything. And by that point, I had a network of people I knew and who knew me. I think there's a lot of times that new creators who want to get into this space, they lead with their work and not with their themselves as a person.
That's
And
good.
there's nothing more off-putting to me than somebody who I've just met and within 30 seconds are pitching me work. I'm like, I just want to know, Ramon, I just want to know, like, where'd you grow up? What do you like to read? Let's geek out about something we both love. And then the second, third, fourth time we talk, 10 years from now, we start talking about work. So that's the way I approached it to get into the industry. Was I'd like to think that I became a person that by the time I was ready to pitch, I was somebody that other people wanted to see succeed. So that's my number one advice. Obviously, you need to have the technical skill, but get out there, be a fan, be somebody that's personable. You meet people, and by the time you're ready to show them your work, they're rooting for you. They want you to succeed, and so hopefully all the stars align for you.
10 years seems to be like the standard, you know. When I first decided to go back into comics, I used to work with Amy Chu
Oh yeah,
on a magazine like decades earlier during the 90s. And so I asked her, "Hey Amy, can I take you out to lunch? I'd like to pick your brain about the industry." And she said it takes about 10 years. So
which is great. I feel like it took me 10 years to like figure out how to write this stuff. Stuff that I first wrote was not good, and just get a little bit better and a little bit better. And then over the course of a decade, I was meeting people. So I had the skill and the network ready to go after that time. Um, and 10 years sounds like a very long time to folks who
goes
are
by
just
like
starting
that.
out. Well, it goes by like that, but also remember, you're trying to get into comics, and that research, those that you're pounding the pavement, but the pavement is San Diego Comic Con, LA Comic Con. And how fun is that? That you get to spend a whole decade just going to Comic Cons and being a nerd. And I love it.
It's funny also, because I'm at 10 years now too. But the thing that's happened in the past 10 years is my vision of what I want, of what career I want has changed, you know, over the past
What's
10
your vision?
years.
What was it to start, and what has changed with it now?
Well, in the beginning, I just wanted to get work from any comic book company, right? And
Mhm.
now it's much more specific. I was just thinking about it today. I want to produce books that will allow me to do some public speaking.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, publish something that's that you can go on like book talks and
Like, I want actually what I want to do is I'm not haven't shared this quite yet, but I want to, do self-help graphic novels.
oh yes, that'd be
Uh,
great. I
so
can't think of one other than Scott McCloud's great books about understanding comics and making comics.
well, that's very
Um,
industry specific. You know,
industry specific, yeah.
have you ever? Do you remember a book back in the 80s called Everything I Ever Wanted Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten?
Hmm.
And it was just basically a bunch of essays and short stories that this guy, Robert Fulghum, wrote. And every single one had a life lesson in it, and I'd love to do something like that, except in the graphic novel format. So
Everything I needed to know, I learned from comic books.
there you go, something like that. So, anyways, let me see if I have another question. So I ask you that. Let me ask you one more question. I'm going to open up to the audience because we're at the half-hour mark.
Okay.
Most of your work has been in the direct market. Any plan or desire to work with more traditional book publishers? Because as you know, in the last 10 years, a lot of the big publishers have now dipped their or have gone into graphic novels. So
Absolutely. To me, being in the book market with Penguin, Simon and Schuster, Scholastic is it's such a it's a goal of mine. I love middle grade, like middle school, especially middle school spooky, like Goosebumps. I
mhm.
love that stuff. And that's like a bread and butter of the book market. So I would absolutely love, and I've got some stuff in the works that's very close to that. So I hope that's the next step that I can take in the next couple of years. But absolutely, that also it's like a nuts and bolts type thing because you go to the direct market, these are comic shops. Direct market is comic shops. And the comic shops, you can sell X copies of a comic book. And in the book market, you will sell right out of the gate 10 times as many, even if it's not a success. A book that sells 10,000 copies is not considered very successful in the book market. And a comic that sells 10,000 copies is considered very successful in the direct market. So that book market is, I'm on the screen reaching for it right now.
I see more and more creators making. I mean, there are because I did my thesis on this topic, that the schism
Mm,
between the two industries, and as much as there are creators who basically just started in the traditional book market, I'm seeing a lot more direct market people making that leap or dipping their toes into the traditional book market, and I think you're right. It's a very shrewd move because it's the volume. It means, however, trying to reach a different audience because I think the direct market skews older,
of
right?
course, yeah.
Whereas the traditional book market skews younger. So
I think a tiny fraction of families, for example, go to comic book shops, but tons of families go to libraries.
yeah.
Kids go to school, bookstores, and to have a book that is in schools, libraries, Barnes and Noble, indie bookstores is a wildly different from that Wednesday single issue up at the comic
Mhm.
shop. So um, I think it's a great market that I would love to be in. I can jump over that chasm, the schism between the, the direct market book market.
If for anybody who comes to this podcast regularly, it's like I'm always preaching, that the bigger audience are in are the younger are the kids. They're the growing audience. So
They love Amulet. Like Amulet has 140,000 volumes, right? It's like 27 volumes, and kids just devour it, and they devour it over and over again. Raina Telgemeier has
yeah.
just figured out that formula.
Hmm.
So to be in that space, if you're striving for be in comics, if you're striving to be in that space, that is a great goal to have.
Absolutely. So anyway, so now I'd like to open it up to anybody in the audience who'd like to ask a question. So just unmute yourself because I think everybody's on mute. And if I didn't mute you. So let's see, Char, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, speaking of which, are you planning to use AI in the future?
No.
Short for artificial intelligence.
Yeah. No, not at all. And I think that the work that comes out of AI, even if it's technically the art or writing, even if it's technically top notch, it feels soulless to me. So, and
I'm
also
learning to get used to AI and try to master the art of AI. I'm using it for backgrounds only.
Hey, Char, are you an artist or a writer?
I'm a little bit of both.
Okay, got it.
You just have to be very careful if you want to get into the comics industry about using AI, because right now, the industry as a whole, creators they frown on the use of AI rather than traditional art
duly
techniques.
noted.
So
I'm aware of that.
So
thanks so much, Char.
Yeah, do not don't do things that create
other people such as artists, animators, film directors, are including Hayao Miyazaki, are very pissed with AI.
Yeah, and you don't want to create any more barriers than already exist out there.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm like a double agent for both AI and human artists.
Okay, thanks so much, Char. I'm going to go on to somebody else for a question, okay? Thanks so much for your question. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Who's got a question? Come on, guys. We have David over here, who is a very accomplished writer. Okay, I'm going to ask another question then. David, so you've been in the industry for 10 years, and I ask this question of a lot of people, but it'll be interesting to hear your perspective because of your law background. I'm not sure if that'll have any role in this, but what and you see that the industry is in a state of flux, right? People are always saying that it's dying or whatever. So what change would you think we would need, or would you like to see in the industry?
What change? I think I don't know how popular or unpopular this opinion is going to be, but a couple of things. One, I think shop owners really want to support comics, but then when it comes time to do ordering and things, they always just order like DC, Marvel, the biggest image titles, and they're not putting other work out there for readers to buy on the shelf and experience and learn about new creators. So I think that's something that shops are going to end up adapting to, is trying to get more diversity on the, or like title diversity on the shelves. And the other thing is, I think comics, I look at them and they feel very similar. I feel like we've plateaued. So I want to see creators pushing the envelope, doing different things with art, and really being outsider with stories and that sort of thing, to make it stand out from the 100 titles that come out every single week that are on that new comic wall. The more they push the boundaries, the better off, the more likely it is you're going to stand out. So do something crazy, do something that you don't think anybody's ever done before, because that's what's going to stand out and help you get successful.
Got it. Earlier, you mentioned that we talked about you doing film and TV. How did you break into that industry?
By writing comics.
Okay.
It's a chicken or the egg scenario, right? Do you make comics to get into TV and film, or
did you use comics and show it to an agent, or did somebody find your comics and say that they like this property? So
Well, like anything in any entertainment industry, it was a referral from somebody I knew,
got
um,
it.
who sent me over there. And then the work has to speak for itself. Again, you got to do the networking, you got to meet the people, but once you meet them, you got to have that calling card that is undeniable. So I'm not saying mine was undeniable, but it certainly was, enough to get a team together to be able to work on these kind of things.
What kind of so basically you took one of your books and you pitched it. Is there
Well,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I had done like separate, scripts, like movie scripts, and then I had comics, and it sort of all worked together to get to that place.
Okay. Is there a project, whether it's in film, TV, or in comics, that you can describe that's your dream project that
Well, I
you
want to
wish
write
you-
Beetlejuice in comics.
ah
That's my favorite movie of all time. It was the first movie I remember seeing in the theater. Um, and I just have such a soft spot for it. So I want to do that. I would love to do a Beetlejuice television show, a new one. Um, and yeah,
how
I
did you
think
feel about the sequel coming out?
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I think I think it feels like it has the DNA of Beetlejuice. So I'm really optimistic about it. Um, Yeah, but that's sort of on the licensing side, that's my brass ring, and on the creator on side, I'm really delving into horror right now. So some things are coming down the pike that I'm such a horror hound. You can see, I don't know if you can see on my screen, but this whole shelf right here is all my Stephen King,
Uh-huh.
top to bottom. So I'm such a I still got my Stephen King shirt on right now. Uh,
Anybody adopted Stephen King into graphic novel form? I'm trying to think.
oh yeah, Sleeping Beauties. Uh, Oh, the Dark Tower, the whole Dark Tower series was at Marvel. There was a lot. There's a lot.
Oh, really? Okay. I keep thinking of Stephen King, like I I'm not a big horror guy, but I loved like Stand By Me, and I
Sure,
think
I love that. I love it so much.
The
Um,
Green Mile was also Stephen King, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
great. My favorite, my favorite story that he's ever written was a short 150-page novel that was called Elevation, and it was about a man in his 60s, I think, who um, was losing, he seemed to be losing weight, but then he discovered that he's actually losing his connection to gravity. So he could get on a scale and put a coat on and rocks in the pockets, and he'd still get lighter and lighter and lighter. So
I think I heard about that. Yeah.
it's a metaphor about aging and what you leave behind when you're eventually going to just float away into the atmosphere. And it was such a beautiful meditation on what it means to be getting older.
I might have to read that.
It's so
Um,
good.
Michael has a question. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, I
Hey,
know the feel. I mean, I'm a storyboard artist. Finding work is always network, because there's no guarantee the guy you did a job for, he'll have work for you anytime soon.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, this is why I'm kind of going back to comics in a way. I mean, I have a PFA, cartooning, illustration, storyboards, and stuff like that. But you know, crowded labor market. I mean, everybody and their mom's trying to get into all these industries.
Well, on the flips, I'll say a couple of things. First off, doing storyboards is great. Is great prep work for comics because basically you're making comics. You're making a movie in comic format and panels. Um, and there is a lot of people who are trying to get into comics. But there's two things about that. One is there's also a lot of brand new publishers that are coming out that are looking for work. That are looking to publish books, which is really a terrific development. And then there are so many ways to get your work out there that have nothing to do with publishers. You can go the crowdfunding route like Kickstarter. You can go web comics. You can publish it on your own web page, and it doesn't have to look like a web comic. It can just be digital pages that you put up. You can put it on Instagram. Instagram has squares, the comic panel. So you can just, or page, you can put one panel comics. You can tell a story that way. There's a million ways that you can get your work out there without having to worry about any of the gatekeepers at the publishers inviting you in they'll invite you in after you've published your work out on the, in the interwebs.
But I'd also like to ask, with graphic novels, I mean, I remember one of my professors talked about graphic novels kind of being the future for comics because are the economics of like floppies are it's just not there, and also the worst thing you can have is a what's it called, comic book store or whatever. They didn't get this month, and now you got to search, and more of the specialty shops are gone these days. So,
Yeah.
like the problem of DLCs with video games, like they show up incomplete, only half done, and then they keep stringing you along, waiting for the next part. At least graphic novel, complete story, done. You don't have to try to find me until the next book's ready.
Yeah, and there's definitely a sweet spot where you can do both. Sometimes we treat the single issues as kind of marketing for the collection.
Yeah, that's
Because
better for it, especially now.
and yeah, and so somebody told me this statistic. I'm not sure if it's exactly correct, but I certainly like it. They said when you publish a book, you get 10% of your sales in the first 3 months, and you get 90% of your sales for the life of the book when it's on the backlist, which is like after 3 months after it's out. Comics is not like that. The single issues come out each month, and then it's the next one, and it goes into the bin, or the dollar bins or whatever, or the back issue bins. And then once you collect them, then that book exists forever. Whether it's in print, out of print, it's out there, and hopefully it can be ordered. And so 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're not going to find those single issues, but you're going to find the collection. You're going to find the graphic novel. So it really just depends with kids like middle school level. Graphic novels are the way to go, I think, because you don't have the audience for the singles. But adult comics, horror, a lot of people still go to that shop, at least enough to justify the collection down the road, which will then exist for years after the single issues have come out.
One of the things that I think are an advantage of the middle grade children's graphic novels is that with adult comics or graphic novels, you're not guaranteed every year that there's a new batch of adults who wants to read a graphic novel. But with kids, every year there's a whole new generation of kids who are looking for graphic novels.
That's a great point. You just have a replenished audience every year.
Yeah.
New sixth graders every year.
There's no guarantee that every year you'll have a whole generation of people who want to read Saga again, as great a book as it is. But
Right.
every year there's a whole batch of people who want to read Captain Underpants. So
that's the place to be.
So one of the things that happens, whether you're doing creator owned or even a licensed work, is that after the book is out on the shelves, whether you make more money or whether you get hired again will depend on sales, right? So my question, and I remember years ago I asked, it was an image panel. I asked what I can't remember the question, but they said that the thing they hate most about getting the image contract was that they had to do all the marketing themselves. So I'm asking you, what do you do to market your books after you've written them? What are some of the things that you do?
Oh, geez. I hire a publicist.
Oh.
I mean, there's some traditional things that you can do, like getting the first announcement into like a comics media outlet, like Comics Beat, and then getting placements, like the first 5 issues reveal, getting interviews, going on podcasts. I do a ton of podcasts when CANTO first started coming out, and even as it was continuing to come out, I would do all these podcasts. get to know the hosts. And so when new stuff comes out, they always bring me back on to talk about the newest project. So it's social media, word of mouth. There's not a lot of paid advertising, that kind of thing. It's more like earned advertising. You can send your work out to buddies you have in the industry and get that quotes from them, that you then blurbs that you then publish and say, look, this creator that you really respect really liked this book, so you should go pick it up yourself. You're going to like it. That kind of thing. But then a lot of it has to do with just the quality of the work and word of mouth. I see books come out that catch fire, and then you read it and you're like, well, yeah, of course this catches fire, because everybody who reads it is going to tell 3 of their friends to also read it because it's so good. So a lot of it's in your hands, publicity wise, a lot of it's in your hand creative wise, and a lot of it's in the hands of the universe and what ends up going viral.
Well, when you said that you did a lot of podcast interviews, one of the things that sort of irks me about a lot of bloggers on podcasts is that almost all of them are preaching to the choir, right? It's the audience is other creators almost all the time. So what kind of podcasts were you going on?
Well, it's probably similar to the ones that you're talking about. There's a lot of industry podcasts that are YouTube channels, or that they'll go do reviews every week of books that come out, new number ones. They'll bring on the creators. I think the goal of these podcasts is to create an army of folks who are excited about your work, who are listening, and then they go out and they tell their friends, and their friends tell their friends, and it's just, that's what happened with CANTO, and how it got successful was that we went on one show that was like, I know the word speculator is kind of fraught, but the comics industry, they were like collectors and they really loved this book. And so we went on their show and they told everybody, we really think this is something. We love the story beyond even speculating on whether it's going to have value. We love the story. And then people started talking to each other. And by the time it came out into the shelf, everybody wanted to get a copy of it. So that's the ultimate goal when you do appearances, to promote, is to get people to champion your work as much as you champion your own work.
You think I would work with a middle grade book, the same strategy?
100%. Go to schools. Go into schools. Get kids super excited that it's a superhero that wears his underpants on the outside. Kids are going to be all over that, and then they're going to tell their friends, and their friends are going to tell their friends. That's how all of this stuff, Dogman and all of these different ones, that they're just kids who are passing these around. And so it has to do with the quality of the work and you getting out there and having some fun. I can't wait to do my middle school or elementary school tour and just talk to the kids and geek out together about comic books and how much we love them.
Hey, you mentioned earlier that you hired a publicist.
You could tell I have a little passion for this. Yeah.
So, what was that process like?
Again, it's a networking. We had met somebody who was a publicist in the industry, and she had a lot of connections, and we talked with her and she was willing to take us on. Obviously it costs money, but I think it's worth, especially if you're trying to get out there, it's worth getting those opportunities to get into comics media, to get to get reveals and get interviews, appearances, because you may not know these people, you may not know these folks. So the publicist is the one who does know all of them.
I might email you just for a referral.
There you go.
So let's see. Does anybody else have any questions? Tyler, you're unmuted.
Yeah, how did you're agented, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just curious to know, how did the search for an agent go?
It's horrific. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, Tyler. It is, again, I hate to keep harping on it, but it's about being friends with folks. The way I got my agent was that I was friends with one of her other clients, and her client read something that I wrote and liked it and sent it over to her and said, "Hey, I think this is somebody you should look at." Got my manager the same way. So it's really about being in the industry, making friends in the industry, people you trust, who getting a mentor at some point they might pass you along. I find it's very difficult to go. You can go to like conferences and festivals and things, and you might be able to sending work or whatever. But it's very hard to get an agent that way. It's more, they're much more inclined to take somebody who is referred by somebody else they already trust. I know that's an answer that's not helpful, but
It's a new perspective for me. So, thanks anyway.
yeah,
I appreciate it.
sure, of course.
Thanks for the question, Tyler. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, so let me ask you, David, what's next on the horizon?
Well, I'm allowed to talk about it. We're doing more Ghostbusters. We're doing another Ghostbusters story arc, which is really exciting. And then there's a few things that we're a little bit early in the process to talk about. But like I said, I'm really leaning into horror. So I got a couple really cool horror books that are coming out. I even have, turns out, middle grade graphic novel series. It's going to be coming out. There's a long lead time on those, 18 months, 2 years. So maybe by 2026, we'll see this book. But it's that middle school, spooky, goosebumpsy fun that I love.
I'm assuming it's creator owned
Yeah.
and it's through one of the traditional publishers.
It's yes-ish,
Okay, got it.
adjacent.
Jason. All right. I'm very curious about doing writing for Ghostbusters. What is it based on the original movie, or is it based on the latest movies?
So it stars the family from the Spanglers from Afterlife and Frozen Empire, and it takes place between those two movies when they first moved to Manhattan into the firehouse. So we get
Oh,
to
so
tell some
it's
stories.
so it's sort of like a sequel to the first one, but a prequel to the last one.
It's
And then
bridging. It's bridging the two movies when they first moved to Manhattan and start renovating the firehouse and just sort of getting their feet underneath them. And there's a lot of mayhem that happens in Manhattan before we see Goraka in Frozen Empire.
was this something that you pitched, or was this something that they under their direction, as far as being from them going from Midwest to New York City?
That's something that they had planned for the franchise. So they already knew that was happening. So what they did was talk with the publisher, and they came up with that gap of time. It's like, we want to put the stories here. And then beyond that, they brought us in and we were able to pitch our own takes, our own stories, our own boogeymen, our own ghosts, our own big bads. So I got to do two of them, 2 4-issue story arcs where I got to create new ghosts and Ghostbusters, which is, the Ghostbusters fan, was fun. It was a lot of fun.
I'll bet. Oh, Michael, go ahead. You have a question.
What do you think of the old anime series and the whole realization that they had to call it the real Ghostbusters because some older show actually was called Ghostbusters as well and was going up
Yeah.
against them on TV?
Isn't it fun that they found a way to troll the old show by calling themselves the real Ghostbusters? I love that. I was a kid.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
Sorry.
I was an 80s kid, and I grew up watching the real Ghostbusters after school on Saturday mornings whenever it was airing, when it first came out. So I loved the show. I love it. I have right behind me, I don't know if you can see it, my D&D manuals, and then over here is my Tobin Spirit Guide, which is all the ghosts from Ghostbusters from the entire universe. It's my reference material. I have a job where my reference material is a freaking spirit guide from Ghostbusters. It's pretty darn, it's cool. It's never lost on me how fun this is.
Okay. Any questions? Because I have another one. Okay. So you mentioned earlier that it took you a while before you could you were practicing law for a long time before you were able to give that up. So the insinuation there is that you're able to work as in comic books full time. So my question to you is, and we know that comic books don't pay that well. So my question to you is, how many projects are you juggling?
I mean, it's the mix between TV, film, and comics, honestly, that allows me to sort of do this. So I get to pick which projects I want to work on in comics. So again, it's I couldn't. I'm probably working on 3 or 4 right now.
Mhm.
I know folks who work full time just in comics who juggle probably 10 in any given month. They probably have 3 or 4 scripts that they write in any given week. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, when I came back into comics, I decided to come back as a writer because it took me like back in the 90s, it would take me about a day and a half to do a page, and I just knew that knowing page rates, I wasn't gonna be able to survive doing
Right.
illustration. But
No.
as a writer, you know, you can kind of work on multiple projects within a
Yeah, and
month.
the scripts for comics are, if you know where you're going, sometimes it takes me a long time because I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. But
Mhm.
if you know where you're going, those scripts can go pretty quickly. So you can do quite a few. But of course, it's a matter of getting the work as well, getting the
Uh-huh.
paying work versus the creator-owned work, getting royalties
Right.
versus page rates, all those things. It all works together. It's a rich tapestry of ramen noodles and hope.
Okay, we have time for one more question before we close it out. Anybody? Okay, then I'm gonna ask that one last question. So here's a question I ask a lot. What is your brutally honest advice for anybody who wants to work in this industry?
And we've talked about a lot of advice so far. So what I'll say is this: look at your work, pull work off the comic shelf from Marvel, DC, Image, and when your work stands up to that work, that's when you're ready. Because the work that's on the shelf is the things that the editors are picking to publish. So when you look at that, that's where you want to be. Is
Thank
that brutal enough?
you. It was pretty good. Chris
It was
Sotomayor said,
soft.
Chris Sotomayor said, you know, finish it.
Finish shit. I love that.
So I
Sit
thought
down
that was
and
the best one.
work.
Yeah, there you go. So anyways, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Let me just make an announcement on who we've got coming up next month. We have Stephanie Williams, a writer, historian, scientist, and mom. She has done work for most of the major companies. And after Stephanie's on September 11th, and on September 26th, we have Ariel Hovelanos, who's a freelance illustrator who has done work for, I think, DC or Marvel. Which one is it?
May I ask you a question, Mr. Gill? I
Yes, go
heard
ahead.
she has a son. I just want to know. I don't mean to be judgmental, but I was wondering how old he is.
I have no idea. We'll have to ask her when she comes to
Okay,
okay.
I'm just preparing for it
Thanks, Char.
in
Appreciate
case I
always coming
hear
and
it,
having questions.
hear him,
Okay, let me finish my
just in
announcement.
case.
So and it will be interesting with Ariel because we very often we will interview creators who are pretty seasoned, but Ariel I think is at the beginning of her career, so it'll be interesting to talk to somebody who's at the start of her career. So anyways, and I have a couple other people lined up after that, but no dates are confirmed yet. So again, please give a nice big round of applause to David for coming up tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So it's very
It's
enjoyable,
fun.
David. One of the things that I think benefits any creator in this industry is having being very nice and having a great personality, and it's quite evident with David that he is a joy to have around.
You got 1 full hour of my jazz hands, and now I get to go collapse.
So anyway, so one last thing, David, if people want to follow your work, where can they go?
I'm most active on Instagram at David M. Booher. I'm still on X at David Booher. On Facebook, you can look me up there. But mostly you can find my stuff on Instagram, and then yeah, and wherever comics are sold, hopefully.
Awesome. Okay, well, again, thank you, everybody. And we will see you guys next month. And David, thank you very much. Hope to see you again at one of these events. Are you going to come to ALA in Chicago?
I don't currently have plans for it, but it's about
I'm
11
sorry, not
months away,
Chicago,
right?
Philadelphia.
Philly, yeah. I love Philly, so and it's always sunny there, so maybe I'll show up.
If you do, I'll see you there. Okay,
Cool.
guys,
Thanks.
thank you so much. Have a nice night. Take care. Oh, and the recording should be up by next week. Bye.